Katie Pavlich joins us now, Fox News contributor, political expert and analyst. And Katie, first off,
good morning.
It's easy to analyze the race. Hey, let's talk about who's winning, what issues matter. But then we want to make sure the vote is right and the American people's will is adequately reflected in the final result. And we might not be getting that with mail-in voting. Before you hear from AG Barr, do you think there's any worry on the left, like there is on the right, about mail-in voting?
I don't think so, considering that the left has been ignoring the fact that there are multiple cases of voter fraud that we've seen over the years in a number of elections. They're ignoring and burying their head in the sand with the most recent election, primary election in New York between with Representative Carolyn Maloney, who's the House Oversight Committee chairwoman. So I don't think that there is much concern, and the media has been covering for Democrats who say that voter fraud just doesn't exist, that mass mail-in voting is just fine, despite whether states have cleaned up their voter rolls and that they are sending ballots to eligible voters, people who are still living, and people who aren't getting two ballots or ballots from people who previously lived at certain addresses.
And Katie, Attorney General Barr went on CNN yesterday and talked about the risks of states changing those rules about mail-in voting at the last minute. Take a listen, and then we'll love to get your thoughts.
With fire, we're a very closely divided country here. And if people have to have confidence in the results of the election and the legitimacy of the government, and people trying to change the rules to this methodology, which as a matter of logic is very open to fraud and coercion, is reckless and dangerous. And the people are playing with fire.
Katie, what are your thoughts on that?
So what the Attorney General is getting at there is if you do not have results in a timely fashion, in an era where the country is divided and people disagree about the legitimacy of institutions, and there are questions about why Democrats are changing the rules in a bunch of states around the country at the last minute, despite the fact that there are these mass leftist protests out there. They want people to engage in a mass mail-in voting system and change the rules. The Attorney General is warning that that could cause unrest and it could cause distrust in the system. And at a time when things are very fragile in America, as we've seen over the past just 2 weeks, that is something that we can't afford as a country. And they're stoking the flames, as you said, playing with fire by wanting to go through with something like this and pushing the possibility that we would not have the election results on time. And you've seen Democrats engage in a strategy here. You've seen Hillary Clinton say that Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances. Well, that doesn't really help when it comes to the peaceful transition of power and accepting election results and being able to move forward with the country in a peaceful manner onto the next term, no matter who wins the election.
That's right. But I think you're exactly right. I think the way you described it, right now we are at a fragile place. There are a lot of people who feel like there are such perhaps foundational changes going on, and it freaks some people out, you know, between what we see on the street with law and order and violence and even cancel culture. You know, you look at what it was suggested down in Washington, D.C., where, you know what, we're thinking about renaming or contextualizing the Washington Monument, Jefferson. Otherwise, we're gonna move them, or we're gonna tear them down, or something like that. Yeah. Since then, the mayor has said, you know what, we're only talking about things on D.C. District property. Nonetheless, the Secretary of Interior had this observation. Listen to this, Katie, about making big changes to such foundational parts of our history.
No one will be removing or renaming the Washington Monument or the Jefferson Memorial. None of that is going to happen. It's just simply nutty. Each of these great individuals did great things. No one is saying that each of these individuals was a perfect human being. Each monument was carefully deliberated upon, carefully placed on our nation's mall. And if you walk into it and you see the preamble to the Declaration of Independence and other great things, I think that gives you a great sense of what American exceptionalism is about.
Katie?
Well, he notes that this is a nutty idea, but it's a real idea that has now been put in writing by leftist politicians who hold the same views as many people in federal government. But the main point here is that the National Mall and the national monuments belong to all Americans. Washington, D.C. is not just another city like Portland or Chicago. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States of America, and every monument here belongs to every American. And if you thought that taking down Confederate statues was controversial, just wait until they start trying to manipulate or take down national monuments. And I believe that they will too. So that is something that the Trump campaign and President Trump have been talking about. You know, I was at the White House with the president about a year ago, and he joked about how, yeah, well, they're going to go after the national monuments, the Jefferson Memorial, the Washington Memorial. Everyone thinks that's a joke, but watch it happen. And here we are in a document. I know they've backtracked a little bit to say, oh, we're just going to do D.C. property memorials or monuments. But the bottom line is that this is not for those bureaucrats to decide. These monuments and the city of Washington, D.C. belongs to all Americans, and those monuments mean something to millions and millions of Americans and millions of people around the world who come here to see them.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. If you have a Democratic president with that Democratic mayor, with the Democratic influence that is way to the left, I don't see Joe Biden standing in the way, as maybe the Jefferson Memorial is barred by scaffolding in the future.
I think the American people will stand in the way.
Maybe.
I think the American people will stand in the way.
I hope so, Katie.
I think they will.
Katie, thanks so much. Appreciate it.